Rain lashes against the marble pillars of the forum. Lightning strikes, turning the towering statues into silhouettes that cast long, jagged shadows across the wet cobblestones. Rome, the empire that conquered the world. But its greatest secrets were not hidden in palaces. They lie beneath your feet. The city is a mask, and the true history is buried in the silence of the earth. Follow the line of the foundation down, where the water drains into the dark. The camera descends into a narrow, mud-slicked fissure wedged between two ancient stones. The noise of the city begins to distort, muffled by layers of history and compressed soil. The air grows cold, thick with the scent of damp earth and stagnant water. Every step downward strips away the grandeur of the surface. We leave the light of the storm behind, trading the open sky for the suffocating grip of the underground. The ground narrows. The walls close in, slick with moisture and time. We are no longer walking through a city. We are entering the forgotten veins of an empire, where the weight of the surface holds the darkness in place. We descend further, into the absolute silence of the deep, where the path ahead vanishes into a throat of shadow. The passage opens into a network of tunnels carved directly into the soft volcanic rock. Torchlight flares, casting frantic, jumping shadows against the walls. The air here is different. It does not smell of death, but of damp stone and the lingering presence of those who once huddled here in secret. We move deeper, past rows of empty niches. The walls are etched with crude, hastily scratched symbols. A fish, a cross, a shepherd. These were not the markings of the state, nor the grand monuments of the Senate. They were whispers in the dark. Each mark represents a human life pushed into the shadows, forming the lungs of a silent, underground resistance. We trace the rough lines of a carving. The stone is worn smooth by centuries of desperate fingers. The silence of the catacombs is not empty. It is heavy with the weight of people who refuse to vanish. We find a small alcove, cleared of debris, where a single iron lamp sits rusted into the floor. This was a sanctuary, a place where the empire's reach could not extend. The flickering flames catch the dust motes, making the walls seem to pulse like a slow, rhythmic heartbeat. We are inside the hidden pulse of Rome, standing in the very chambers where the forbidden was kept alive. The tunnels dip further, the rock shifting from porous volcanic stone to hard, unforgiving granite. The air pressure drops sharply, chilling the skin. We emerge into a cavernous, circular space, distinct from the narrow catacombs. In the center stands a slab of dark, polished basalt. This is the Mithraeum. The stone altar is carved with the image of a bull, its form contorted in eternal struggle. Centuries of ritual blood have seeped into the porous cracks, leaving behind a deep, rust-colored stain that refuses to wash away. The walls are not marked with the hopeful symbols of the resistance, but with aggressive, jagged, geometric patterns that seem to vibrate under the flickering torchlight. This was the dark heart of a cult that operated in the shadows of the Senate, promising power that transcended the reach of the Caesars. We lean in. The surface of the altar is cold, slick with a fine layer of moisture. There is a faint, metallic tang in the air, a ghost of old iron and sacrifice. The silence here is predatory. This was not a place of refuge, but a site of transaction, where influence was bought with ritual and the promise of dominion. The shadows cast by the bull carving stretch across the floor, reaching toward the threshold of the next tunnel. The path narrows into a jagged fissure, then abruptly opens into the vast, suffocating labyrinth beneath the Colosseum. The air here is thick with the smell of wet earth and ancient oxidation. Rusted iron cages line the walls, their bars twisted as if by immense force. These were not meant to hold beasts, but to contain the human cost of empire. We move past heavy pulleys that still hang from the ceiling, chains swaying in the stagnant draft. A series of secret trapdoors are set into the stone floor, some partially open, revealing dark voids that lead into the foundations. We find a latch, its surface pitted by centuries of neglect, still locked in position. It was here that the unwanted were silenced. Those who saw too much, those who dared to whisper against the state, were brought into this damp dark. They were lowered through these very doors into the arena, or simply vanished into the lower depths, never to be seen again. The sound of water dripping from the ceiling echoes against the iron, a rhythmic, hollow beat, We trace the edge of a trapdoor. The stone is worn smooth by the repeated movement of heavy machinery. This was the dark engine room of Rome, a place where history was erased, one life at a time, beneath the feet of the cheering crowds above. The heavy, stagnant air of the ancient arena dissipates as the timeline shifts forward. We are in the mid-20th century, inside a cramped tunnel beneath the modern city streets. A construction worker leans into the task, his shoulders heaving with every rhythmic swing of a steel pickaxe. The rhythmic strike of iron against rock creates a steady, jarring percussion that reverberates through the narrow space. Dust clouds rise, coating the air in a thick, gray haze. He stops to wipe sweat from his brow, then drives the pickaxe deep into a section of the masonry. The impact is different this time. A hollow, resonant thud echoes back, vibrating through the handle and into his palms. He pauses, his breathing ragged in the tight space. He strikes again, harder. A jagged crack spiders across the stone, and a slab breaks free, falling into a void beyond the wall. The dust settles instantly. The constant, ambient drone of the city above seems to cut out, replaced by a sudden, heavy silence that presses against the eardrums. He lifts his light, aiming the beam into the dark, impossible gap. The light catches nothing but the edge of a perfectly smooth, man-made surface that should not exist in these foundations. He lowers the pickaxe, his hand trembling, as he realizes the wall was never meant to be breached. The worker steps over the rubble and into the chamber. He sweeps his lantern across the walls. The beam catches color vibrant, impossible pigment that defies the damp decay of the surrounding bedrock. He moves closer, his breath hitching as the light reveals a series of expansive frescoes covering every inch of the stone. These are not the crude carvings of the ancients. The images depict the stars, but not as the Romans saw them. They show celestial alignments and complex orbital trajectories, mapped with a precision that ignores centuries of astronomical ignorance. Circles intersect with impossible jagged angles. Lines of geometry trace out shapes that seem to vibrate under the flicker of the torch. He runs a gloved finger along a painted arc, the pigment still smooth, as if applied yesterday. It is a star chart of the entire system, rendered in a mathematical language that should not have existed for another 1,000 years. The worker pulls his light back, his eyes darting across the walls. The geometry is recursive, folding in on itself in a way that makes the room feel larger than it should be. He tries to look away, but the lines draw his focus, pulling his mind into the logic of the shapes. This is not art. This is a manual, etched into the silence of the earth, waiting for an audience that was never supposed to arrive. The worker turns his back on the star charts, his lantern beam sweeping toward the far end of the chamber. There, embedded directly into the solid bedrock, stand two massive bronze doors. They are seamless, fused into the stone so perfectly that no hinge or seam is visible. He walks toward them, the crunch of loose stone under his boots sounding unnaturally loud in the confined space. As he nears, the air temperature drops sharply. He reaches out a trembling hand, fingers hovering inches from the bronze. He touches the metal, then jerks his hand back as if burned. The surface is not merely cold, it is freezing, pulling heat from his skin with a rapid predatory hunger. Across the doors, etched deep into the dense metal, are symbols that defy any known alphabet. They are jagged, intersecting patterns that seem to shift if he stares at them for too long. He traces the lines with his light. The symbols are not carved. They appear to be embossed from within, as if the bronze itself were forced to take this shape. He leans in closer, his nose inches from the metal. The marks hum with a low-frequency vibration that rattles his teeth. He stops breathing, staring at a central sigil that resembles a weeping eye. He realizes the doors are not keeping something out. They are holding something in. A group of scholars enters the chamber, their heavy boots clattering against the stone floor. They ignore the frescoes and the bronze doors, moving instead toward a central pedestal. Sitting atop it is a glass cylinder, sealed with wax that has not cracked in 2 millennia. One scholar reaches out, his fingers shaking as he uses a small blade to break the seal. A sharp hiss of escaping air fills the room, a vacuum, broken after ages of silence. He tips the jar, and a roll of vellum slides into his gloved palms. He lays it out on the flat surface of the pedestal. The parchment is supple, resisting the brittle decay of centuries. He begins to unroll it, his movements slow, deliberate. As the outer layer pulls away, he freezes. He leans forward, his spectacles slipping down his nose. The ink is dark, shimmering, and wet. He reaches out a trembling finger hovering just above the surface. He touches the edge of a character, and the liquid pigment smears under his skin, staining the glove with a fresh, viscous black. There is no dust. There is no dry rot. The ink behaves as if it were applied only seconds ago. The lead scholar gasps, pulling his hands back as if the scroll were radioactive. He looks at his colleagues, his face pale in the lantern light. They are not looking at a relic. They are looking at a message written in the present tense, far from the scholars. A lone relic hunter navigates a secondary, deeper chamber. His lantern casts long, flickering light against a central stone sarcophagus. It is carved from obsidian, smooth as glass, with a single seal embossed on the lid. He sets his heavy pack down, the dull thud echoing against the damp walls. He checks his surroundings, then returns to the lid, his breath hitching in the stagnant air. He reaches out, his fingers tracing the cold, sharp edges of the seal. There is no resistance, only a faint, rhythmic pulse beneath the stone. He presses his palm flat against the center. A sudden, high-pitched hum fills the chamber, vibrating the very marrow of his bones. He tries to pull back, but his hand is locked, glued to the obsidian. The air around him ripples, distorting like heat haze on a road. He opens his mouth to scream, but the sound is swallowed by the silence. In a blink, the hum stops. The chamber is empty. The obsidian surface is still, the seal undisturbed. On the floor, his lantern lies on its side, the flame still burning. His heavy boots, his leather tool belt, and his scattered equipment remain exactly where he dropped them, untouched by time, as if he had simply dissolved into the air between one heartbeat and the next. The camera pulls back, rising through layers of rock and history, leaving the silent, empty chamber far below. We burst through the surface, greeted by the roar of traffic and the golden glow of the modern city. Tourists walk the sun-warmed cobblestones of the Forum, oblivious to the void that breathes beneath their feet. The ruins stand as grand, silent monuments to a power that once claimed the world, but the true history of the Empire remains buried in the deep dark. Rome vanished, yet its echoes still pulse beneath the foundation of every modern street. The city above thrives on its legacy, ignorant of the doors left waiting in the bedrock. The path into the labyrinth is not meant for the living, and some seals were never intended to be broken. The weight of the earth keeps the secrets contained, but the ground is restless. As we hover over the eternal city, the final torchlight flickers once, twice, and then gasps out. The flame dies, the warmth vanishes. Total darkness swallows the screen, sealing the narrative in an absolute, crushing silence.